Now let's understand the type of content analysis. Sanders and Finley have suggested 5 types of content analysis. First, word counting analysis. Second, conceptual analysis, semantic analysis, evaluative assertions analysis, and contextual analysis. All these types of content analysis can be explained beautifully with the help of examples explained by Ramuja in his book on research methodology. Word counting analysis. This is counting the use of certain keywords in different texts. For example, one can count the word democracy and totalitarianism to measure the degree of democratization in 5 nations: India, England, Canada, France, in a sample of elite newspapers. The object could be to find out whether there were any blatant difference between the nation as represented by elite newspaper. This may involve several months and numerous codes and analysis. Similarly, terrorism and authoritarianism can be studied in Pakistan, Israel, Afghanistan, etc. Then is conceptual analysis. This is the analysis of words grouped into conceptual clusters or ideas. The constructive variable in a research hypothesis. For example, a conceptual cluster may be formed around the ideas of deviance. Words like crime, anomie, corruption, assault, juvenile delinquency, sexual harassment, embezzlement, etc. could all be clustered around deviance. Using conceptual analysis, a researcher wants to find relationship between public concern in different sectors of society through the analysis of newspaper articles that attempts to connect one sector with the another. Semantic analysis. In this, the researcher would be interested not only in the type of words used, but also in scaling their intensity weights, like using weak and strong words, positive and negative words, and so on. For positive and strong word, plus a score would be used, and for negative and weak words, minus score would be used. For example, love +2, dislike -1, and so on. Measuring these positive and negative scores, community's feeling can be assessed through content analysis. Then is evaluation assertion analysis. Suppose relation between labor and entrepreneurs are to be analyzed during the labor movement through content analysis of newspaper articles. By finding out how one treated the other by use of certain words, it becomes possible to point out the conditions that led to strike. And finally, contextual analysis. This is used to predict future verbal behavior based on the analysis of non-words and concepts. For example, by use of words like militant, firing, bombing, explosion, etc., one can establish scale for non-verbal behavior. Sarantakos has indicated 5 types of content analysis. First one is descriptive analysis, where analysis means counting the frequency in appearance of certain elements of the research question and comparing it with the other element. Second is categorical analysis, where analysis involves a study of the documents by means of set of categories, producing nominal as well as ordinal and interval data, which are then processed statistically. Intensity analysis, which is processed by means of multi-step scales based on theoretical criteria. Then contingency analysis, which is basically a semantic analysis that is usually employed to make an inference from the text about the personality of the author. And finally, contextual analysis, where sequence in which concept appears together is examined. The systematic appearance is not considered accidental, but it expresses the thinking pattern of the author. The aim of the qualitative content analysis is to reduce the material so as to make it manageable. Summarizing the content analysis. Here the material is paraphrased, that is omitting less relevant passages or those having the same meaning are reduced. Thus, the material becomes more coherent, economical and manageable. It is a kind of editing of the material in the order to draw out its essence. Explicable content analysis. This work in opposite way. Here statements which are puzzling, contradictory or unclear are explained or clarified by keeping in mind their context or by looking for clues in other parts of the text that would help make their meaning clear. Then structuring content analysis. Here the researcher looks for type or formal structure in the material by applying categories that emerge at the stage of formulating the research question itself and organizing the material accordingly. Thus, qualitative content analysis helps the researcher to reduce to manageable level large masses of text using a uniform scheme of categories, which also helps the comparison of different cases to which is applied throughout. According to Berelson, following 5 procedures can be used to determine the objectivity in content analysis. First is the rule guide procedure. It may be said that the objectivity in content analysis requires 3 criteria. What is important is not the categories developed by researcher for analyzing the content material or the procedures adopted for placing a unit of communication in one or another category, but to spell out the rules and methods used by the researchers so that it could be evaluated how conclusions were reached. Secondly, systematic procedure. Besides the rule guiding procedure, which could be replicated by other researchers, adopting the systematic procedure also contributes to the objectivity of the content analysis. Then quantitative description. Counting the frequencies appearing in different papers, magazines and communications and comparing their validity is essential. This is to assess the intensity of a particular variable. Qualitative data becomes more valid when it is quantitatively assessed. Focus on the qualitative analysis. Merely concentrating on counting the frequency in content analysis will be missing the overall sense of a body of communication. Therefore, both quantitative and qualitative technique must be used in conjunction with one another, assessing only the manifest content of communication. It has already been stated that besides the manifest content, there could be the latent content too, in which the researcher has to read between the lines and give meaning to it as he perceives it. This affects the objectivity of the analysis. It is therefore necessary that emphasis be given only what appears explicitly in communication. This does not mean that the researcher will totally refrain from engaging in any interpretation of the material studied. Without interpretation, how could content be analyzed? Then let's discuss the advantage and disadvantages of the content analysis. Ram Ahuja has given following advantages and disadvantages of content analysis. One of the significant advantage of content analysis is that it is thoroughly unobtrusive method. That is, it has no effect on the subject being studied. In other methods like interview, observation, experiment, etc., the researcher is directly involved with the person. Content analysis eliminates the source of responses bias that threatens research whenever the respondents are directly questioned or observed. It can be used as a reliable central technique in historical research concerned with the particular period or with trends over time by studying people who are no longer available to answer the questions. Thirdly, it makes possible a variety of cross-cultural studies that would likely be unfeasible using the other methods. And finally, it can be used to test preliminary ideas, hypotheses or theories prior to a more complete investigation. It is a powerful tool for evaluating personal social values. People are more candid while writing down the thoughts than when confronted by interviewer or a questionnaire. Therefore, studying society where people are more literate, content analysis proves to be a more reliable method of research. This method is more useful when research budget is small and resources are limited. It is easier to repeat the study through this method. Repetition of study through other method may not be feasible either because the event under study may no longer exist or because of cost, time and money. Since content analysis is a heavily planned method, it lacks the spontaneity and unplanned qualities of field research. Determining validity is difficult. For example, did the newspaper give the real values and feelings of the workers during the strike? Probably not. Some required documents may not be available to the researcher, which may affect the conclusion, and it is susceptible to coder bias. In this module, we have understood the concept of content analysis. It is a technique of interpreting various kinds of textual material to arrive at valid inference. It analyzes various documents systematically and converts qualitative data into quantitative data. We have also understood various types of content analysis and the various steps that are to be taken during the process of content analysis. Finally, we see some advantages and disadvantages of this, but this is the best method that can be adopted for making any kind of qualitative research into a quantitative research, and it is nowadays used very much in various kinds of social sciences and communication sciences.